We see Chris rizzing up Royce's sister, telling him to make some undergarments out of the silk that he's giving her, and hold up. What the hell are you trying to make her do, bro? Agatha is excited for her task, but interrupting the group, Amelia walks in. She tells Chris that she was offended that he stopped by her territory and didn't even say hello. Chris apologizes, but Amelia says it's okay, and even offers her family's help in taking the wolf's den. But Chris confidently tells her he doesn't need any help. Amelia is taken aback, but asks Chris how he's so confident to take this stronghold without royal support. Chris sips his drink and can tell that Amelia is smarter than she seems. In his past life, Chris knows that the Zighal family survived even after the royal family's collapse, and this was due to Amelia's magic called intuition. So Amelia, you are the one-stringed wizard. There must be a symbol on your body. Chris ponders the reason why she is here, but Amelia asks if she can stay for a few days, and even requests to be called My Lady. Chris says he'll call her that if she formally introduces herself as Lady Amelia, which shocks her. She takes back her previous statement and tells Chris that he can call her whatever she wants. Guys, Chris is teaching Rizonomics over here, like what the hell? Time passes and Grape tells Chris that the Wolf's Den has responded to the declaration of war. Chris reads the response and thinks that it's quite aggressive. Grape asks Chris if he's ready, and they begin getting a lot of pressure from the royal palace. Chris tells the man that they're almost ready, just a little bit longer. Grape is shocked, thinking to himself that Chris is really confident on taking this fortress. We shift to Desaleo talking to an elder who asks if he really thinks Chris is up to the task. The elder isn't convinced, and in all of his years, no one was able to take that fortress. This time will be no different. But even if Chris fails, the salt mines will be in their possession. But Desaleo doesn't even know what outcome he even wants from Chris. We shift back to Proudman as Pumpkin is barking at Chris and Ego. The clouds are getting dark, and this signals to Chris that it is time, as he calls all of his knights. They wear light armor, and Chris tells the group not to pack many weapons. Take only what you need. Everyone suits up, and Agatha wishes Chris well. Amelia watches the two lovebirds talking, but looks at all the wise knights in front of her, shocked at Chris's influence. Chris puts on his hood, telling Amelia to watch closely. She feels the mark on her leg and thinks that Chris might actually take the fortress. It's time to go, but Grape still doesn't understand how 6 of them will take the entire fort. This is too reckless. But Streak tells the boy that he had his times doubting Chris, and he knows if there's one person who can find a way, it's him, Chris Proudman. He will be successful this day. We see the Wolf's Den stronghold getting some heavy rain. A commander is informed that the recon team hasn't found anything yet. Fedora, the commander, smirks with confidence. Just how long does Chris plan to hide? The soldiers tell their commander that this heavy rain is making it hard for their scout teams to continue, and maybe they should ask for assistance. But in this story, no smart soldier's advice is ever taken, as the commander tells him it's not needed. This stronghold has only one path to it, a front road, and it's exposed, so any number of troops will instantly be spotted. The back of the castle faces a steep cliff. Fedora thinks that no matter how clever Chris is, he won't ever take this stronghold. The commander goes to take a nap, telling his soldier to update him, and we shift back to Chris and the boys. They are Naruto running through the forest, and Lin notices the rain getting stronger, and Chris thinks to himself that this is the only chance that they will have. We go back to Fedora, who's waken up by his soldiers' screams, and the fort is overflowing. But as he wakes up, he notices his room is almost full of water. The heavy rain is filling the entire fort. The man orders his troops to get everyone to try and get rid of the water. And back to our heroes, the storm is getting worse for them as well. Their oiled cloaks are now wet. Chris tells everyone to remove the cloaks, and now they're going to run towards the fortress. As they approach, some soldiers see them coming, but assumes, since it's only 6 of them, that they can handle it. Chris doesn't want to let anyone escape and calls for Digo and Doki. They dash in, ending the 2 soldiers with ease. Chris tells everyone to stop and orders Doki to make a hole for everyone to climb in, and when Chris gives the signal, they will dive in. He overlooks the stronghold and reflects on his life. A lot of things have changed for him and those around him, but some things will never change. On this day in the year 899, even without Chris attacking, the wolf's stronghold was destroyed by the wrath of God, and the men inside are panicking. The water is overflowing, and the commander locks himself in a tall room, despite his soldiers begging to go with him. Please open the door. He hears their screams as they drown, and the man asks why this is happening here. He needs to get out. He enters the next room to see it full with more of his men. He tries to get them to move, but despite his orders, the next hallway fills with water, seemingly ending all of their hopes. Chris sees the tide approaching and orders his own men to get inside of the hole they made. They do so and begin holding their breaths, and Chris knows when the vibration stops, it'll all be over. The storm clouds soon clear, and somehow Fedora has survived, as a hand extends to bring him up. But it's not one of his men, but rather Chris, asking if the man doesn't recognize him, the mole hiding behind a wall. The fort was completely destroyed, as Chris now sends for his troops to occupy it. Grape wonders if Chris received the revelation from God or something, but Chris just lies and says it was all luck. Grape wants to ask more but has work to do. Chris orders his archers to enter the fort and take positions, and the rest of his forces to begin repairs. Grape watches on and thinks that Chris really might end up being a king. Nighttime comes and Lind is joking around with Chris, but they see someone approaching. But it's Streak. He quickly enters the castle, telling Chris that they have an emergency. The king is dead. And at the same time, a rebellion began. The Grand Duke has raised his banner. Chris thinks on the situation, and he has been commanded to return to the palace. He bites his lip, and this is happening way too fast. What a disaster. Now they won't be able to get extra troops from the capital. And on top of that, they need to withdraw their own troops from this territory. Right now, even after taking the stronghold. But Lin yells at Chris that another army is approaching. He is relieved to hear, however, that this is the Marquis Zighal's men. They are approaching saying that they are here for their lady's orders, and Chris smiles. She's making it really hard for him not to like her. Chris orders Lin, Digo, and Royce to stay here with Zighal's men and defend the fort. The rest of them will return to join the war. We shift back to Proudman, and Agatha is worried on what will happen. Chris says everything will be fine and asks Agatha if she made the clothes that he asked her to. Chris wears this cool new shirt and talks to Yviron, telling her it's time to make a deal with the 8 gates. She is shocked. How can they trade with them right after taking their stronghold? Chris says that it will be fine and he puts on his armor. The Wolves are a money-hungry faction and they sell salt to the Gold family, so they can strike a favorable deal. Yvarin asks what to say if they don't accept, and Chris tells her to remind those bastards what happened when he spared the green-eyed boy, referring to Perth. Yvarin thinks Chris is insane and asks where he's going. But he gets pumpky and is off to make another ally. We now see Wehane sipping some wine, thinking that both powers want his support, and asks his knights what they think. Gideon thinks that they should wait and observe the situation before making a decision, but Jofil says the decision is quite easy. They just need to join the side with the most military power, and Wehane is in an opportunity to gain power. Now Sir Cardo rests on him, and it seems it's his time to become king. As the man smiles, Wehane Ludwig will rule the continent. Gideon wonders if this is the right path. Wehane is not a worthy leader, but Wehane asks if there's any information on Guillen. It seems he sent word that he was training, but this just means he's avoiding his brother, which makes Wehane angry. He orders surveillance to be increased around the tower. If Gan appears, kill the woman. Chris is riding through the forest and tells Pumpkin to stop. Long time no see, Chris, and it's motherfucking Cannery. Oh shit. They talk a bit, and we see Guillen sitting by a tree. Chris walks up to see his longtime friend, and Guillen is impressed. You actually took the stronghold, huh? Not too bad. But what's the deal? Chris asks Guillen what he plans to do during this war. He just sighs, and it seems his moron brother wants to become king. Chris has been keeping tabs on the situation and knows why Guillen is still tied to Wehane, asking if he plans to keep his oath to his lady. Guillen turns around furious, sparking his aura, but Chris yells at him. How long are you going to be dragged around and leave that person trapped in that damn tower? Guillen tells Chris to watch his mouth, and he draws his sword. If he talks anymore, he will have to kill him. Chris unleashes some of his own aura. He's not the same boy he was before, and the two face off. Guillen dashes in, but Chris blocks his strike, and the two send a flurry of attacks at each other that causes the earth around them to distort. Guillen is taken aback by how far Chris has gotten. What the hell are you? Kennery approaches, telling the two to calm down, and Pumpkin lets off a huge fire blast, separating the two. Even your dog breathes fire. What the hell? Fox comes asking if Guillen is alright, and Chris says hello. Guillen calms down, and Chris asks if he really plans on doing nothing. Guillen doesn't want to get involved, but Chris asks him, how many people are in Daybed? Guillen answers that there is about 10,000, and Chris firmly tells the man that 10,000 lives will be lost if they don't stop Wehane. Kennery and Fox start to sweat, but Guillen doesn't seem interested in others, and tells Chris that Wehane is also targeting the south. Chris wonders why he would go there, but is informed that his target is Proudman. He's going to use this opportunity to make peace with the 8 gates, and have them back him for the throne. Chris thinks Wehane is a crazy bastard, and even plans to sell out his own country. Chris can't waste any more time, and he's gonna save that person that Guillen is sworn to, and tells him to take care of Wehane. Guillen takes a moment, and then asks Chris why he's going this far. The boy answers that it's all for this country. Guillen tells Fox to follow Chris, and thinks that right now he doesn't even know what to do, and has a flashback. We go to his younger days where he used to get into fights in the streets, and how he would come home beaten and battered. But one woman would always be there for him, ready to treat him. But Guillen treated her like shit, pimp slapping her away. but even doing so would not turn the woman away, as she always would care for him. In his flashback, Gian gets up from the bed and overhears the girl who is introduced as his mother talking to a man who's begging her to come with him, leaving Gian behind. But she will never leave her son. Daisy is his mother's name, and not once does she ever betray Gian. But one day, as he comes back to his home, he sees his mother being surrounded by a group of thugs. Gian can't control his rage, and this is the first stage of his power awakened. He slaughtered all of the thugs holding his mother now, and Baron Ludwig enters the room, amazed at what he saw. Daisy wonders why the Baron came here, but he ignores her words, asking Gian where he learned to fight. Gian says that no one taught him, and the Baron asks if the boy wants to become a knight and be able to protect his mother. 3 years pass and Gian was finally promoted to a knight, and his mother is so proud of him. He gets on one knee, swearing to the heavens that his sword will be hers, and for the rest of his life, he will protect her. Back to the present, Gian looks on towards the tower that holds his mother. He can't get involved, but he trusts Chris will be able to save her. Please, let my mother be safe. Fox and Chris stand in the forest talking about Weihane mobilizing his forces, but it's time to move. As they approach the tower, Fox fills Chris in on the layout of the tower, and the lady is confined on the top floor. And if anyone comes near, the maids have orders to kill Gian's mother. Chris thinks that this is tricky. They can't walk into the front, but out of nowhere, Chris's ninja girlfriend appears, telling him that it's impossible. She can bring him a corpse, and that's the only thing she can guarantee. Fox gets angry at what she said, but Chris tells him to calm down. Rachel, let's talk about this for a moment. Rachel lowers her mask and says that Chris can use her, but she can't use him. Huh? Promise me that after this job is done, you will make an effort to find my name. Chris promises and asks if she has a plan. Rachel says that the two of them can infiltrate the tower on a bright night. 3 days pass and the two are on top of a tree branch and they begin scaling the tower with their bare hands. One of the soldiers hears something, but Pumpkin comes up with a good idea and makes noise in the bushes. The man thinks that it's just a stupid dog, and Rachel tells Chris that he's pretty good at climbing. But he did used to be in a thieves guild, so it's only natural. They continue to climb and Rachel asks if Chris is concerned about Proudman. The situation seems urgent. Chris knows that his back is to the wall, but fortunately for him, he has friends that he can trust. As you see Digo, Lind, and Royce bravely defending the stronghold as they hold down the defenses. The 8 Gates commander is getting impatient, asking about the troops that they sent towards the rear. We shift to this group as Bozo number 1 walks into a thin wire. Next, a smoke bomb explodes, and the men are being taken down one by one, as Chris's old herbalist friend steps out of the smoke, asking where these bastards plan on going. We shift back to Chris and the two approach a window. Chris looks inside and sees Daisy, with a maid attending to her, and another one by the door. They can't enter like this. They need to draw away the maid that's next to Daisy. We shift to inside the room and the lady asks to meet her son, but the maid tells her that she can't, and she just has to trust the Count. Daisy says that the Count that she knew is dead, and now Weihane is in control. So now she is forbidden to meet her son. Is that how it is? The maid has a wicked smile, telling the lady to please believe her. Gian is just really busy. Daisy is tired and she wants to die, and prays to see her son one final time. But all of a sudden, in the mirror, she notices Chris waving his hand. She knows what's going on and asks to get some fresh air. The maid tells her that she can't leave, but Daisy yells for her to at least open the window. The maid walks towards it, warning the lady not to come close. They don't want to repeat what happened last time. But as she creaks open the window, Rachel comes flying in, and Chris enters as well, kicking the shit out of the maid by the door, holding her down. They secured the lady and the soldiers catch on as they hear the commotion upstairs. Bozo 1 knocks on the door but is cut down, and now the soldiers begin flocking up the stairs. Chris takes care of them one by one, and if he can handle them like this, he should get out of here easily. A soldier goes to the commander, which is actually Mikoi, and the two are shocked to see each other again. Mikoi grits his teeth but knows that no one in this tower is strong enough to challenge Chris, and he orders his men back. His soldiers don't agree, but Mikoi starts yelling, telling them that he is a wise knight. They have no chance. The troops should fall back and wait for reinforcements. Chris tells Mikoi that it's been a while, and he's changed quite a bit. We shift to Weihane as Gian stands in front of him, and Weihane yells, telling Gian to drop his sword and take a vow to serve him. But all of a sudden, a soldier bursts into the room, telling Weihane that someone assaulted the tower. The man is now stressed as he curses his brother, and he orders his men to capture Gian. But he ain't no bitch, as he gets into his stance and draws his sword, dismembering everyone around him. He will keep this short. Anyone who stands in his way will die. We shift back to Chris escorting Gian's mother down the tower. He looks out the window and sees Gian arrive. The soldiers outside the tower are confused. Wei-hein and Gian are here. Gian opens the doors to the towers and sees his mother. Emotion overflows as the two hug each other. Gian promises to never let something like this ever happen again. Chris looks at his friend and tells him that it's time to go. Gian can't find the words to say, but Chris yells at him, asking how long he plans to stand idle. Is seeing your mother enough? Will you let Van Ludwig's legacy die in vain? Accept your fate and continue forward. Gian Ludwig. The man now has a new look of determination, asking Chris what they should do about Wei-hein. Chris says that they can't kill him just yet, but the two need to leave. Gian tells his mother that he will be back. She cries, asking him to please return safely. Chris tells Daisy not to worry. Her son has grew up into a fine man. Gian opens the doors to see Wei-hein surrounding the tower, and the cocky brat orders his crossbowmen to fire at Gian. Gian just walks with no pressure and swats down every arrow. Wei-hein orders his knights to catch the traitor, but Gian yells, asking Wei-hein who is he calling a traitor, as he opens up a decree showing the knights that Wei-hein has been dealing with the 8 gates and planned to betray their kingdom. Wei-hein calls himself a king, and I, Gian, proclaim, I will not let the land my father spent his life protecting to be sold to the enemy, and hereby banishes Wei-hein from this land. Wei-hein tries to order his troops to defend him, but the uncertainty starts to creep in, as Gideon himself starts to doubt his leader. Half of their troops are with Jodphil, and now some of Wei-hein's soldiers are beginning to turn on him, asking if what Gian is saying is true. Long have they suffered because of his selfish ass. Gideon kills the soldier and tells Wei-hein they need to leave now, and orders his men to retreat. We now shift to the first front, the Celio's military headquarters. The man asks if Chris is here yet, but is informed of Ludwig's aggression on Proudman. The older man thinks that the situation suits them. Chris is busy taking care of someone who betrayed the crown. The Celio is concerned on that situation, but the older man watches him, thinking that every event that is happening is pre-planned. The first prince is strong, but lacks intelligence. The second prince is too weak, and the third prince has a strong body, but lacks character. And a country without a king is destined for destruction. The only relief is that the first prince listens to those who can persuade him. So the elder tells the prince to calm down. The duke started a war without justification, and this is treason. They are not alone in defending the royal family, and soon their allies will arrive, and this war will turn out as a total victory. We shift back to Ludwig's territory, and Chris and Gian are roaming the streets. Wei-hein ran with his tail between his legs, and some nobles begin to shit-talk Gian. They agreed to follow his father, not him, and unrest begins to build. But Gian won't force anyone to stay. Chris asks if this is a good idea, but Gian says he can't hold anyone back, and asks Chris what he plans to do. Chris has his own problems and needs to amass his forces, but in the meantime, wants to have a duel. Gian just laughs, thinking how Chris can ask for a duel in a situation like this. But Chris's real goal is to level up his wise proficiency, and right now he's at 38. And every 10 levels, it's a huge boost to his strength. Gian is a 4th level wiser, so Chris needs to catch up in order to fight the Duke. We shift to Wei-hein, completely destroyed over what's going on. One moment he was a lord, and now he's running for his life. Wei-hein has the bright idea to join Jodphil and Proudman, but Gideon sees something coming out of the bushes and tells his lord to step back. But arising is Jodphil and his troops, all beaten and battered. He was unable to do much against Proudman's defense, but he took minimal casualties and decided to retreat, hoping to regroup, but it seems Wei-hein's hopes are starting to disappear. A few days pass and Chris is meeting with all of his knights and overlooks his troops. He has his personal squad along with 200 soldiers, but we see Gian and Kenry on horseback. Gian dismounts and takes a deep breath and yells to the whole crowd that he is Gian Ludwig. And after the death of his father and banishment of his brother, who lied with the enemy, he will now inherit the throne of the Count. And from this moment forward, he will serve only one man. Gian gets on one knee and swears his allegiance to Baron Chris Proudman. And even if his body becomes old and rusty, he will fight on any battlefield for his lord. Chris is taken aback by this display, but accepts Gian's oath, and he will guide his sword. He tells his men to rise and points his spear to the sky, ordering everyone to prepare. They're riding into battle. We are taken to the battlefield in question as a soldier is running for his life, but is splatted like a bug by Valmung. He's getting bored of these weaklings, and he orders his men to clean this up. Rold watches from a nearby cliff, and his knight is getting excited. Ryzen informs him that the general of Tigis has come to support the royal family, and this news makes Rold smile. It doesn't matter who stands in his way, he will destroy them all. Rold asks about that brat Chris, and is informed that he's fighting Ludwig's troops. He doesn't think he's going to be able to get out of Proudman, but Rold has a confident look. He is almost certain that Chris will arrive to face him. We shift to the elder, who's introduced as the Earl of Haido, and he is told that the Duke's men are advancing north, and this is faster than they anticipated. The Celio still questions where his reinforcements reinforcements are, but right on cue, Tegus' troops arrive. The Saleo walks out and has a pleasant surprise. He never would have thought that this man would come himself, as we're introduced to another badass, the general of Tegus, Lance King Abel. The Earl is shocked at his arrival, and his presence is heavy, and this man is known as the strongest in the central continent, despite his age of 70 years. His strength was invaluable, even to the king. But Abel interrupts, asking if Chris will be here. He kinda wants to spar him, at least once, and man, everybody wants a piece of our boy. We shift back to Chris, and Lind asks if he has a plan. He knows that the Duke's army is steamrolling the Saleo's men, and their first stop should be Rold's estate. Chris and his men are on the move, and he tells Guillen to hold his position and scan the surroundings. They are approaching a castle as the men notice the hundreds of horses coming around. The man on top of the wall sees the Proudman insignia and is shocked. Aren't they supposed to be fighting Ludwig? Did he already defeat that large army? But interrupting his thoughts, Lin lets off an arrow from a couple hundred meters away, but the captain manages to catch it a centimeter before his neck. Lind is disappointed, but the captain breaks the arrow and sees a note tied to it. Stick together. The captain has to calm himself. He needs to defend this castle for his lord. Chris is a man that was recognized by the Duke. He can't take him lightly. He orders his troops to ignore them for now. Lin sees what's going on, and Chris knows that this is to be expected of the knight who doesn't bleed. Withran, fade us. Something like this won't shake him. It's time for Plan B. He orders his men to set up camp, and Withron begins reading a book as one of his soldiers comments on how bold Chris is. They just need to be patient and wait for their lord's return. 3 days pass, and he sees Chris just partying with his men, drinking to their heart's content. Withran wonders if Chris really is a baron, but all of a sudden some troops are approaching from the west gate, as we see Wehane's remnants arriving, and this confuses Withran. Weren't these the two armies that were just fighting? Chris is alerted to Wehane's arrival, and this is just as he planned. It's time to begin. Right now, Withran feels surrounded and needs to prepare an escape route, and thinks that he'll have his cavalry break through the east side and destroy the enemy. Digo is sent alone to meet this force. Chris can't lose any more troops, but it's time to show them the strength of Proudman, as Digo unleashes his transcendental fear. He lets off a huge slash, taking out dozens of horsemen. Withran is in awe. Chris sent one man to deal with his cavalry. How far will he insult Withran's strength? The man starts to become furious and is falling right into Chris's trap. Digo continues his assault, killing one after the other with ease. Withran can't believe that Digo just walked into the center of his cavalry without a second thought. How reckless. Even if he is strong, Digo is just a simpleton, and Withran still believes that he can escape. He orders his archers to fire, and Digo's horse is shot down. Chris's troops are unable to assist, and Royce wants to go in and help, but Chris holds him back. He knows Withran's personality. If he can't win, he will run, and Chris is familiar with his thought process and his experience in war, but believes in Digo that Digo will break their foolish delusions. We shift back to when Chris was training his knights, and they need to unlock the wise skill, Double. Their enemies are on the 4th stage, Overhuman, and they're already behind. Digo is sparring Royce, but Digo is starting to overpower him. Chris knows that this man's strength is not affected by Double yet, and he's just naturally this strong, and he's slowly becoming a monster. Withran orders his men to surround Digo, and they begin to encircle him, but his wide slashes prevent them from coming close. But a spear is hurled, charged with wise energy. It doesn't connect, but grazes Digo's side, and Withran is among his troops. The assault combines the troops and Withran's spear throws, and is starting to take its toll on Digo. He's losing ground. He knows he has only one chance. After taking hit after hit, Withran thinks that he has him now. He has to make sure. His spears start to do more damage, and Digo kneels to the floor, coughing up blood. Withran comes confidently and hurls another spear, and it pierces Digo's side, causing Royce to yell out. Chris is worried, and Withran holds his spear, telling Digo to be proud. He is quite the fighter. But Digo isn't done yet. He uses his strength to hold the spear into his body. I got you now. Withran starts to panic, and Digo breaks the spear and charges his wise energy. We shift back to Tykiel saying that if Digo can reach Double, his strength will be comparable to Overhuman, as Digo unleashes his aura and dashes in. Withran's soldiers try to block him, but they are removed with a single strike. Withran looks over at Digo as the light of his halberd reflects off of his helmet, and all he can do is apologize to his lord. And Digo doesn't just remove his head, but half of his body, and the boy begins to yell at the top of his lungs. Digo has reached a new level. This display crushes the morale of Withran's troops. Even if they are outnumbered, Chris has the upper hand. He moves forward, yelling to the Duke's forces that their commander is dead. If they hand over the castle, he will let them live. The next in line was informed by Withran already that if he died, to save his strength and join the main army. He orders his men to abandon the fort. Lind wonders if it's okay, but Chris is also worried about preserving his own fighting force. And a siege would definitely not end without casualties. In a civil war, the more bloody it is, the weaker the nation becomes. They need to end this soon, for Sir Cardo's sake. They have only one goal now, to eliminate the Duke's forces. And just as expected, Wihane hasn't negotiated with the Duke. Chris puts on a helmet and calls for Guienne and Royce. Wihane is at the west gate getting impatient and turns to leave, but a man comes out of the gate ready to meet them and relay the information. We see Wihane's tent as his soldiers let these people in. But now, another soldier comes in informing Wihane that something's off. The Duke's men are escaping the castle, and the men they're meeting right now are completely different. Wihane is in despair as a familiar voice is heard. It's been a while, huh? The guards try to protect their lord, but they are easily handled. Wihane grabs the sword asking who this man is, but Chris just laughs. You're busy following me around, yet you don't know who I am, huh? He removes his helmet, and Wihane is seething with anger, and calls to Jodphil, but his boy's a little busy with a sword in his stomach. Guienne tells Gideon to step back, and now the rat is cornered. Wihane puts the dots together, and Chris is responsible for everything, freeing Guillen's mother and driving him into the situation. He tries to rush in with his sword, but Chris easily just pimp slaps it out of his hand, sending him to the ground. Chris will end this pathetic man's life, but Wihane yells out for his own brother to save him. Please, they're related, right? Chris is disgusted by this act and removes Wihane's head. The rest of Wihane's troops don't even know what's going on, but Gideon walks out of the tent with a sword to his neck. The troops are now shocked. What's going on? But they now see Guienne and Chris exit the tent, with Chris holding Wihane's head. He raises it to the sky and tells everyone that Wihane is dead, and throws it to the feet of these traitors. And it only took 90 chapters, but finally this motherfucker is out of the story. Chris reminds the nobles who fled with Wihane that he's eliminating evil from his country, and never in his life did he expect to see Count Ludwig's men like this. Is this really the army that once defended these borders? Are you not the guardians of the castle wall, the fence of Cercado? Are you not the men who defended it down to your last breath? Are you the same soldiers who fought alongside me against the 8 gates? One of the nobles tries to speak. Why is Chris talking and not Guienne? But Guienne says that he serves Chris now. Chris continues his speech. Don't fight for me, but fight for yourself. Don't run anymore. Become the sword that ends this civil war. You are the wall that protects this country, the Ludwig army. Gideon drops to the floor with tears streaming down his face. He cries to be reinstated as a guardian of the castle wall. Please, give me one more chance. Chris turns to the rest of the Ludwig army and tells them that it is time to end this chaos and to end this war. There's no more time to talk. They are hunting the Flying Tiger's beard, which is a nickname for Duke Rold. We shift back to the royal family army, and the fight is not looking good for them as Duke Rold's men begin pushing forward. The Earl's thinking to himself about what the General Tegus is planning. His movements are too passive. Desilio is placed in a hard spot, and we now see Chris sparring with Guienne. His wise proficiency isn't improving, and it's still stuck at 39. Is 40 that big of a leap? Chris calls for Ellis next, but Lind interrupts, informing him that the scouts are back with a report. Chris orders Guienne to supervise the training, and he tells his knights to hone their skills as much as possible before their final battle. Chris looks over at a battle map and sees the royal army has retreated, and General Tegus has joined, but it seems they still can't deal with the Duke's army. Lind thinks that now would be a great time to attack Rold's rear, but Chris's real objective is to attack Desilio, but he can't just yet. Their first objective should be to end the civil war. They need to stick to the plan. Duke Rold is overlooking his army and is informed that Withran is dead. Rold wonders if it was a mistake to leave him behind, but now their problem is Chris, who could be attacking their rear at any moment, and they run the chance of being surrounded. The Duke isn't scared, however, since the royal army won't move. They have no communication with Proudman. Ryzen asks how he can know this, but Rold tells him that he knows Desilio like the back of his hand. The Earl of Hydo won't let him move so easily. Rold unsheathes his sword and pumps it full of aura, excited for his encounter with Chris. The two armies are now facing each other as Valm begins to charge. Lind orders his troops to stand by and his flanks to spread out. They're going to surround them. Valmung enters the battle first, but is met by Digo. It's been a while, huh? Nice to meet you again. Ellis interrupts the reunion and causes Valmung to dismount. He lands and warns the young knights that today they won't be spared. Lind is still coordinating the troops, and Rold's commander is trying to counter their movements, but is hit with the real plan. Chris is aiming directly for the Duke, and at this rate, he's going to reach him. He tries to order his troops, but Guienne appears from behind, unleashing his blade. Did we meet before? Well, not like it matters now. Can you please step aside? I have a duke's throat to split. Gien's aura begins to rise, but Ryzen begins to get angry. In the center of the duke's army, a smoke bomb goes off. The troops rush to defend their lord, but Doki just comes in flying with 2 axes like a goddamn savage. He hits the ground, causing hundreds of men to be displaced. He begins his assault, ripping them to shreds, but behind him stands a towering presence, as the duke himself tells his barbarian to get out of his way. He slams his weapon down, aggravated that Chris is so cocky to meet him like this. But we see Chris intercept his strike, saving Doki. The duke begins to smile. He is happy to see Chris again, and Chris is too. It's been a while, your highness. Chris tells Doki to join the main force and hold his back, but he has his hands full as the duke slowly approaches. This encounter reminds him of the first time he met Chris, and now he understands the boy's determination and tells him that he is his rival. The duke lets off a heavy blow, but Chris blocks. Chris says that he hates obsessed old men, and the two disengage. Chris lets off a barrage of spear stabs. Rold parries them with ease and rushes in. Chris is sent back with 1 blow, and the Duke warns the boy not to disappoint him. And as expected, he has overhuman. The Duke is way stronger than Gien, and his weapon has a wide range. Chris needs to level up as he fights, and can't hold back. He unleashes his maximum aura and dashes in behind the Duke. He prepares his aura into his dagger and stabs at the Duke's weapon, cutting it in half. But Rold isn't impressed and unsheathes his real weapon. Chris notices the frost on his armor. An artifact? The Duke has an artifact? Snow White, an ice element sword. We shift to Desaleo, and he wants to help Chris, but the Earl tells him to think about it. Is Chris even on their side? Chris was easy to ally with the Southerners and Ludwig. When this war is over, he will be a thorn that will haunt them. Desaleo isn't decisive and agrees, and the Earl doesn't care who wins. Both are his enemies. We see Digo still in the heat of the battle, trading blows with Falmung. Fighting him on horseback is annoying, so Falmung chops the horse's head off, but Ellis comes in from behind, which makes Valmung turn to defend. Digo comes in again, but is elbowed back a few meters. Ellis tries to help, but she manages to barely dive under a huge sword slash. Digo tries to get up, but Valmung is stronger than he thought. It's hard for him to move. Valmung looks over at Digo, and from what he remembers, Digo wasn't this weak. Are you injured? Well, doesn't matter. You're gonna die anyways. Right before Digo is hit, Royce comes flying in, and Valmung gets annoyed and begins chasing after the two. But an arrow stops his assault, as we see Lind firing charged shots at him. Ellis is also in the fight, using her water aura to strike as well, cutting his cheeks. It seems Valmung has his hands full, and his anger begins to build. Heads are being chopped off everywhere, as Kennery himself is on the battlefield, killing motherfuckers left and right. Doki joins him, and he was sent by Chris. Kennery yells, asking who is gonna defend Chris if Doki is here. Have you lost your mind? But Doki isn't much of a talker, and it was Chris's order. Kennery orders his men to break through. They are joining the Baron. Gien and Ryzen continue their fight, and Ryzen is impressed. But if Gien listened to his master, he would have conquered the continent, and today, Chris will die. Gien just smirks, and the two disengage. You don't know anything about Chris, so stop talking. He's the man that I've chosen. Gien charges up and dashes back in, sending a quick upward slash that separates Ryzen's chin. But it wasn't enough to kill him. And now we see Chris and the Duke sizing each other up. Chris analyzes the Duke's sword, and it cannot be easily broken, but he will need to block his strikes with his own spear. The Duke asks if Chris is scared, but our boy never backs down as he rushes into the fight. The Duke's attacks now send frost strikes with it, and Chris notices the difference in their strength. He can't win with force, but interrupting his thoughts, Rold appears to his side and slashes at him, sending the boy back. Chris coughs up blood, and his left arm is starting to be paralyzed from the frostbite. The situation is dire, and Chris can't think of a way through. But for some reason, Chris is enjoying every moment of this fight as he smiles, asking the Duke if he feels the same way. The two men clash swords, and it seems finally Chris understands what Rold has been feeling. Chris is an opponent he will never face again. The two send strikes that cause shockwaves, and Kennery and his men are rushing, worried about Chris. Not that he doesn't have faith in him, but he knows the monster that is the Duke. But as Kennery approaches, he sees the Tiger King's troop watching the battle, shouting the Duke's name, making Kennery think that Chris is dead. But when he arrived, the soldiers began to forget about the battle for a second and get mesmerized by something. They start shouting, and in the center of it all was Chris and Rold. Kennery looks on, and this is no longer the boy that he once knew. He is now a monarch whose time has come. Kennery was overwhelmed by emotion and screams at the top of his lungs, "Chris, hang in there!" Kenry was letting out years of resentment hidden inside of him. Chris, the king of the castle wall. The crowd of thousands of men goes silent, and even Rold is taken aback. But Chris's men begin to join Kenry, yelling for Chris the hero, the king of the castle wall. Rold now knows Chris's true goal, to become king. You bastard. Chris tells the Duke that if all the people who believed in him and fought with him don't call him a king, then who deserves to become their king? That's a sick line right there. This is the coolest part of the manhwa, I swear. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Rold is impressed that Chris is finally showing his true colors, and Chris smirks, asking if the man is anxious. But Rold is happy and is delighted seeing his fighting spirit. Chris feels his left arm starting to give up, and there's no time left to hesitate as he rushes back in on Rold. Rold switches the hand he's using to grip his sword and meets the strike, sending Chris back. The two's auras flare up as the battle gets intense. But what's this? Rold is being pushed back? How can this bastard, who's at his limit, be holding me back? And he keeps getting stronger, as you see Chris's spear technique level up to 79. Rold tries to get an overhead slash, and Chris manages to block it, but knows he's being pushed back, as Kenry and Doki yell for their comrade. Rold stands over him, and unfortunately, his left arm won't be usable anymore. It's all over. Chris kneels on the ground, but asks, over? How was this over? Who decided that? Rold is even more impressed as he comes to find that Chris is ambidextrous. He wished that he wasn't this brave, and the two rush back in at each other. Chris sends a barrage of spear strikes that takes back Rold, and he knows it will be difficult to defeat this man, but still, he'll never give up. The two send strikes back and forth and disengage. Chris runs back in, knowing he can't give up. He has to protect everyone that has risked their lives and changed everything in time to be by his side. Chris rushes in, and it seems he's pushing Rold back as the man dashes back, dodging a wide slash. Chris knows that he has a bright future ahead, and he charges the aura into his foot and into the tip of his spear, and he's gonna make everyone's dreams become a reality. His wise proficiency levels up to 40, and he will put his life on the line to defeat this man. Rold starts to get impressed and charges up his own energy and vows to end this. The two, with their aura surging, rushing at each other, but in a single strike, they dash past each other. Chris's spear is still lighting up with aura, and the soldiers watch on in awe. But Rold is missing his side. He gets down on one knee, feeling the effect of this wound. His soldiers call out to their majesty, but Rold tells them to step back as blood oozes from his mouth. He stands up with this giant gash in his side. What a savage. And he walks up to Chris. Do you really think you'll become king? Chris just says that he doesn't know, but he's gonna try. Rold tells him not to put off that decision. Kill Prince Desilio, but please don't kill Sir Cardo. Chris knows why the Duke was worried and says that he will. With his last breaths, Duke tells everyone to listen up. I, Betharium Rold Gauch, order you, from this moment forward, all the knights and military commanders under his command will now be led by Raido Spen. If Raido Spen dies, then Chris Proudman will take over his legacy. And with this statement, Rold falls to the ground. His eyes begin to fade. He can't believe that it's over. But still, it was fun. Chris tells him to rest well, Tiger Duke. Now, footsteps are heard as the royal army begins to charge. Finally, the civil war is over, but Chris looks over and sees something is weird. The mounted troops are not slowing down. He overhears what they're saying, and they're saying it's time to wrap up this war. The disgusting rebels of the kingdom and the traitors who are shamelessly enough to communicate with the 8 gates. Kill them all, as Desilio leads the charge, attacking his own men. Chris understands the betrayal that is now happening, but, he wanted to kill Desilio too, so it's only fair. The men are back in the heat of the battle, and Chris yells at the top of his lung, cursing the first prince. The men are being taken down one by one, and even Desilio is in the battle. He tells them not to miss a single person, pick out all the roots of revolution. Chris yells, asking how much blood did they have to shed to end this war. But the after effects of the battle are beginning to take its toll on Chris as he gets a shock and he falls to his knees. Kenry yells towards Chris, asking if he's alright. He yells towards the men taking care of the Duke's body and tells them to get out of this place. The men yell that they're soldiers of the Tiger Duke. Retreating is not in their vocabulary, and they'll fight till they end up dead. Chris yells, telling them that no good will come out of their death. Don't let the demise of their Duke go to waste, and tells his own men to pay attention. The special force will retreat and they will join with the main force. But interrupting his thoughts is a purple aura enveloping a spear that crashes down, sending a huge explosion. It's the Lance King Abel, as he yells for Chris Proudman. Finally, he gets to meet him. Is that the Tegus' armor? Then this is the old commander, the Lance King? Why is he here? Lance King Abel tells Chris to bring it on. He came all this way to fight him, and dashes in at Chris. The man tries to send the strike, but Doki ends up blocking. Two-handed axe technique. Are you a southerner? This world really is full of interesting bastards, as he sends Doki back with a single slash. Chris realizes the strength that he had in that one strike. He must be a 4th stage wiser or higher. Abel asks what the hell is going on with Chris. Why is he so beaten and bruised? This must be the cause of his battle against the Tiger Duke. Oh, so you're exhausted, huh? I won't get anything if I fight you like this. I'll give you 1 day. Come back to a state where you can fight me on equal footing. Mind this isn't a simple request, but we won't just be sparring. It will be better for you not to run away. If you do that, I will turn my forces on Sir Cardo and your county of Proudman. Abel just gets disappointed and asks Chris to leave. It's embarrassing that so many people are watching. Chris turns and thanks Abel, but Doki says he's ready to kill this bastard. Chris calms him down, saying that they can't do anything yet. Kennery doesn't know what this guy is planning, and neither does Chris, as he thinks to himself that if he was really aiming for his life, he would have ended it right then and there. But maybe Abel's goal is different from the royal family. Chris sees enemy soldiers rushing in, but the first guy is sniped by Lind. Chris tries to regroup as more enemies start to descend on him, but Gian comes slashing them down in front of him. He calls out to Chris and tells his troops to protect their lord. Chris asks Lind what the current situation is, and is told that both of the Duke's swords have been destroyed. They succeeded in crushing the Duke's army in 1 day. Chris asks about his knights, but is told not to worry. Everyone is saved, though they are quite injured. Chris mounts on Lin's horse, and he tells Lin that the royal army has joined Tegus' forces, and they'll soon come after them. Doki and Gian are ordered to clear the way. They're leaving this place. The first prince's troops try to stop them, but they can't. They're being overpowered. Some time passes and the Earl is screaming at Abel. How did he let this happen? They could have had Proudman. They could have had the Baron. Abel just laughs, saying that he was faster than he expected, and the Earl turns towards the first prince. They should chase them immediately. Abel says that they can't do that. His soldiers need time to recover, and says that they'll advance tomorrow instead. The Earl is getting annoyed how he can say that after he barely fought for even a second. But Abel, just like a savage, says that it looks like they don't need his support anymore, and threatens to leave. The Celio tells the two to calm down, and asks the Lance King if he's sure he can end the Baron's life tomorrow, and is told that he can. The Celio says that it's decided, and they will march in 24 hours. The Earl is getting annoyed and wonders what this bastard is up to, and he can't trust him any longer. He's gonna kill Chris with his own hands. We now see Chris's forces link back up in their camp as Chris rejoins his squadron. He sees Digo inside, but he's completely battered. Chris asks if everyone is okay. Digo got the worst of it, but he's injured resting inside of the tent. Chris looks at the situation, and it's far worse than he anticipated. Everyone is exhausted, and at this rate, Chris wonders if they can even win tomorrow. He tells his men that the arrows of war are rushing towards us, and this war won't end until the royal family obliterates us. The allied army is now joined by Tegus' forces, and they're gonna catch up tomorrow. But before he can finish, Ellis just smiles. Don't worry, Captain. I'll smash him tomorrow. None of his men are even feeling an ounce of doubt, as even Guillen says that no one can match up to Chris. Don't tell me you're afraid now. Chris has a soft smirk, and it seems that he was the one that lacked motivation the most. But thanks to all of his friends, his mind is clear. He will always be in their care. And this time tomorrow, they're gonna fight like their lives depend on it. Nighttime comes and Chris is all bandaged up and he lays back in his tent, thinking about the Lance King. He's a stubborn motherfucker and only lives to fight against any rival. That's the only thing he's heard about him from his old master. Desilio pulled his hidden card to deal with Chris, but it turned out to be a complete waste of time. All Abba wants to do is have a battle with Chris, and Chris is sure he's not even interested in operating with the Royal Army. He needs to make full use of this loophole, as Chris begins charging and harnessing his aura. The next day comes and Chris mounts, seemingly rejuvenated, and Lind by his side. Their forces are behind them, and the Celio approaches. Both men yell for their troops to charge in, and the battle continues. All of Chris's knights are in the thick of things, cutting soldiers down left and right. Abel and Chris walk immediately to each other, and Abel asks how his body is doing. You're not gonna die after one hit, are you? Chris thinks to himself that he's only recovered around 40%. He will make sure that Abel doesn't regret the decision he made the other day. Abel gets excited and tells the kid to bring it on, and the two lunge at each other. Abel sends heavy swings of his lance that Chris barely manages to dodge. Chris sends his own spear, but Abel, even at 70 years, is able to do an acrobatic move backward to dodge it, commenting on how quick the boy is. Chris picks up some daggers from his back pocket and throws them at Abel. Abel comments on the technique, but easily blocks him. Chris rushes in, spear in hand, but Abel continues to easily parry his attacks. He kicks Chris back and has his own strike and sends a wide slash that Chris ducks under. Abel stops for a second, thinking that Chris is quite remarkable, but he's lacking in some areas. Chris is excited, and he's indeed the Lance King that he heard about. He fights on a whole different level. We shift back to Desilio, and the Earl tells him he's also going to participate in this attack. Desilio is shocked. Are you really about to step forward? The Earl tells him not to worry. He knows the best method in order to end this civil war, and Desilio allows him. The Earl ends up riding thinking that Abel was a fool for missing Chris, and he's sure now that the only reason he's even on their side is for his personal entertainment. But the Earl doesn't want any more distractions, and he's gonna end everything with his own hands, and he will take over Sir Cardo as he has a wicked smile. Chris's fight with the Lance King is continuing as he throws more knives, but these kind of tricks won't work on him. But along the knives is a thin thread. The Lance King tells him to do something to entertain him as he takes his lance and he hurls it back, slamming it into the ground, creating a huge crater. Chris dodges and turns back, but the Lance King is right on his tail. His spear proficiency levels up to 80, alerting him to this rise. He leveled up with a spear still in his hands. If this is the case, then something might be possible. As he dashes away, Abel chases him, telling him that he can't run. This is futile. But Chris finally has him in his trap as he yanks all the strings that had all the knives from the floor. He calls this move Invisible Wire Spider Hell, as all of the knives that Chris thrown were strategically placed in different areas. The wires are pulled and the Lance King is tripped, surprising him to what happened. Chris takes advantage of the opportunity, jumping above the Lance King, ready to end him. But this man isn't no pushover, as he uses his own lance to strike the ground, causing an explosion, propelling him another way. Chris is taken aback to how he manipulated his wise, and the Lance King just stands there laughing. How many steps did you plan ahead? That was truly a masterpiece, Chris. Chris thinks to himself that he still can't win against this guy, not with his current skill. His own skin is solid like armor, and this might be a wall that's impossible to cross. Abel is a 5th stage wiser, with a nickname, The Wall. Chris notices something interrupting the fight, however, as a huge fire spell is thrown at Chris. He dodges back and the Earl tells him that they're both dumbass knights, and he will make them kneel before the power of magic as he stands preparing another spell. A wizard? Chris notices that this is the Earl of Hydo, the wizard who appeared during the Civil War in his past, and now he has 2 enemies. This might be bad. Abel stands there and is annoyed. How dare you intervene in my fight? As the Lance King's aura flares up into the sky, he's gonna rip this man apart limb from limb. Chris can't believe that Abel is this angry, and one of the soldiers even comes in commenting that don't they have an agreement? They can't just attack each other. But Abel asks why he can't, and now this sentence alerts Chris. An agreement, huh? So Abel can't harm the royal family right now. So it's time to utilize this piece of information. Chris asks if the Lance King can leave this to him. He's not going to step in their way if he steps forward and kills him. So please, let me do this. The Lance King smiles, and it seems that Chris is onto something. He says he's lost his excitement, and now he will take his leave. Chris says he'll learn a few more cool tricks to use in the future, and the Lance King hopes that he keeps his promise, and orders his troops to withdraw at once. The Earl is shocked at what's going on. How can you do this? But he fires another spell, but Chris is at his side. The Earl prepares his hand and motions another blast towards Chris. Chris thinks that this is annoying. This wizard is making it hard for him to get close. He keeps running around, dodging these spells one by one, but Lind comes and throws Rold's artifact towards Chris. Chris thanks Lind for the good work and tells him that it's time to go, and tells him that they'll attack at the same time. Lind lets off a volley of arrows, but the Earl is still confident, thinking his magic will overtake them. He is Hydo, the only sorcerer in Sir Cardo. Chris rushes in at the spell, but slices it away with the artifact. The Earl is taken aback, and it looks like all he can do is play with fire, as Chris ends his life with a single slash. Desilio, after seeing this display, is in despair that his only comrade was killed. Lind points over towards the first prince and tells the troops where he is. Doki is now chasing after him as Desilio tries to regain himself. Doki jumps in the air with 2 axes ready to kill this man. Desilio tries to intercept, but Doki cuts his arm off in a single slash, causing him to scream in agony. One of his soldiers comes up and orders his men to protect their majesty. He makes a makeshift bandage, telling Desilio that he needs to retreat. Someone needs to survive. They can rally the troops and fight again. At least he should make it out of this. He gets the first prince on the horse and tells him that he'll buy him some time. But as he's trying to let him escape, Doki's axe politely sits him down. Desilio is shocked after seeing this and begins running away, yelling for someone to save him. And I mean, he was looking badass for like half a chapter, but you know, yeah, it is what it is. Gien orders his troops to chase after him. The enemy is escaping, as Desilio thinks on how things turned out like this. He was supposed to win this war. What on earth went wrong? Lin asks Chris if they should chase him, but Chris tells him there's no need. This war is already over. The only thing left is Desilio's decision. We see Desilio return to his nobles, and they're concerned on what happened to his arm. Desilio says the rebel army is going to attack soon. They need to start acting before they put them into a siege. He tells them to gather all the royal ministers and prepare a countermeasure. We now see them inside of the palace, and the nobles try to come up with a solution. They need to fight to the very end. Desilio has his hand on his head. He has no idea what he should do. Maybe they should run and take refuge with Tigis. Desilio doesn't like this idea. What will people think of him then? This country needs a king, but Desilio is backed into a corner. A man says that the preparations for Tigis have finished, and Desilio tells the man to prepare a carriage. He now sits at the table alone and sighs. But hears footsteps behind him. Rachel comes asking if the man was planning on leaving. Desilio gets up, asking, "Who are you? How did you get in here?" Rachel says her orders were to kill everyone who tried to leave and spare those who stayed. Desilio tries to argue with Rachel. "Please don't come any closer. What's wrong with you? What did I do wrong?" But in his screams, Rachel dashes in, slashing his throat in a single strike. Hey guys, that's the end of this part. I hope you enjoyed the video. I mean, this was probably my favorite part of the story so far. We still got 50 chapters to cover. But man, Chris's fight with Duke Rold was absolutely sick. All the characters were over there kicking ass. I do wish though we got to see Raidos' fight with Gian as well as Valmong's fight with all the other knights. And I mean, he got ganged up on. It's not really fair. But you know, I can't complain because we did get to see Chris fight the sickest dude in the story. Another side note, Prince Desilio was an absolute pussy, but that was to be expected, I guess. But in exchange for that, we did get another badass character in the Lance King Abel, and I'm excited to see Chris's next fight with him. But anyways, I hope you liked the video, and leave me a comment, a like, and subscribe to help me make more things like this. And I'll see you guys next time.